So yeah, so from my perspective, it is really was a great opportunity coming over here to Australia and following up perhaps some of the links that I established a bit earlier in my research career. And so I think I came out here in 2015 for the first time, and then basically migrated in end of 2019 out here to take up this role as a research director for the Cybersecurity Cooperative Research Center. So in terms of what the Cooperative Research Center is, it's one of those funding vehicles here in Australia. It's really targeting on the nexus between government, industry, and academia. So to look how we actually get applied research through this valley of death. So when you do research and you do very fundamental research, that only goes so far in the university typically. At some point it hits more mature levels where it's becoming more of a technology or becoming more mature. And you're trying to get it to a point where industry can easily adapt it and integrate it into their products, or perhaps even spin out your own companies. But in between that, there is quite some difficulties of overcoming this gap in the maturity between a great research prototype and idea and lifting that up to a level where somebody would invest serious money in it. And we're here to some extent to fill that gap. So CRC is essentially a collaboration between 24 participants, 7 from academia, and the rest is from government and industry. It works similar to some of the funding you heard Chuin talking about on a match funding basis. So we have funding from our participants, and we have funding here from the Australian government. And with that, we have I have the pleasure of basically directing where we invest this about 100 million Australian dollars into research, and collaboratively work on projects that hopefully shift the needle for Australia and generate more capacity and more capability in Australia for this research. In terms of what the mission really is, we want to build talent in Australia. So Australia suffers the same as the UK in terms of having a lack in skilled talent that can directly enter the workforce in cybersecurity, but also perhaps a bit of a gap in cybersecurity researchers. There are not that many here that would actually take that up. It's all about research with impact, and I think you're working and operating in the UK, so you have possibly a more mature approach to research impact than Australia has yet developed. So they're following the UK model, but are a few years behind. So in a way, it is all about making sure that the research that you do will lead to some form of utilization, society impact, economic impact, something that benefits the economy or the country as a whole, society as a whole. In cybersecurity, that is usually a very good story to tell, but it needs to go well beyond I have written some publications and somebody else cited it and thought it was a great idea. So it needs to really transition out. And that's really where this higher TRL, technology readiness level research, this applied research is focusing. And also as a cybersecurity center, we are an independent voice for cybersecurity, with providing advice to entities, to government, having responses to some of the more difficult questions that hit the nation at the moment. So the research areas that we really cover is all around critical infrastructure security and then cybersecurity as a service. So for critical infrastructure, we look at resilient systems, we look at security and configuration management of IoT, development of authentication mechanisms in critical infrastructure, which is a bit of an issue as well here, and incident response. So how in critical infrastructure we're doing mature incident response management in that realm. So operational technology comes into the picture here. So we need to understand what the implications are here, really. When cybersecurity as a service is possibly a bit more of a vague term in that form. So we're looking how we transition some of the existing technologies to be supporting architectures and services so that you can implement systems with privacy in mind, and privacy by design and security by design. The other part is then, as the next theme, security orchestration and automation. So security is happening or attacks are happening at a fast pace. We don't have the bandwidth to manage a lot of our complex systems, so we need to look how we automate a lot of our security operations and orchestrate the different tools and different technologies and approaches that we have. Then we have two more themes. One is really on privacy preserving data sharing, so the whole privacy aspect and how we can actually share data and understand when we share data what the inherent risks are. The last one is about law and policy, particularly in the Australian context of how these different technologies that we're developing are impacting on law, impacting on policy, and what perhaps is required in here. So we're operating with 7 universities or 6 universities and a national research center, which is called CSIRO here over in Australia. The universities that we work with is the University of Adelaide, the University of New South Wales, Deakin University, Queensland University of Technology, Charles Sturt University, and Edith Cowan University. So if you're looking at collaborating with any of those in the future, please do reach out to me. And I have a bit of a nugget for you here in the end as well that I hope you're able to take us up on. The last thing is to provide a bit more focus on these areas. We're focusing really on systems that are in the energy sector, that are in the food and grocery sector as a critical infrastructure, or in ports and logistics. So ports are really important critical infrastructure here in Australia, as is energy and agriculture. And the more, shall we say, the critical technology space, we're looking at automation systems. So you have IoT in there, digital services, so how government and institutions are delivering digital services to society. The last one is really small, medium enterprises as a focus area, because that's where we see most of the security challenges here in the Australian ecosystem at the moment. And the impact that we can do in there is really great. So that provides a bit of a focal point for the research that we do. Now, but what I really want to talk to you about is not really what we do. It's more about how you actually setting up collaborations effectively. So it's quite easy, or it was quite easy. I guess you're all suffering from lockdown fatigue as well. So Australia was sometimes here characterized as the world's biggest prison, because we were not able to travel internationally till very recently. And I think I'm sitting here in sunny Perth in Western Australia. I'm still not able to leave the state, or at least not come back into the state, unless on very exceptional business reasons. So as we are all living up to this new world of COVID and have a lot more interactions through video conferencing and the shared conferences as you have here, the problem is you're not quite making the same connection with people as you used to. So if you were able to just have that evening dinner chat with conference organizers or people at conferences, discuss a bit more about your research than you're able to do in this 15-minute presentation that you give, and some of the Q&A that may or may not happen afterwards, it is very difficult. And I think for me, collaboration is, well, in particular international collaboration, is something that for me personally makes academia really worthwhile. I find it really stimulating. You have lively discussions, intellectual challenging discussions about your topic and that you really care about. So for me, I think academia has lost a bit in terms of what we now can do, given that conferences have shifted in nature and attendance gets very limited to the one talk you really wanted to listen to, and then day-to-day business really takes over. So I want to really, in the remainder here of my talk now, give you perhaps some thought or some things to think about of how you can set up effective collaborations and how to perhaps go about them in the first place. So something that goes a bit beyond having just a phone call, having a quick exchange on LinkedIn or connecting on LinkedIn. That's great. It builds your initial network. It's this little hooks that you put out, but it's not a really meaningful collaboration that will advance you in your research career significantly. So the first question really, I think I want to ask you really in a way is, why do you really want to collaborate? What is the purpose of you going out and wanting to collaborate with other people? So some things that might be in here is, do you want to travel? Do you want to experience different cultures? Do you just want to expand your networks and you're building your own profile through this kind of connections? Or do you want to really go out and test your ideas, exchange ideas with other like-minded people? Or do you just want to broaden the scope of your research? So perhaps you have done some empirical research on security in the UK, and you want to go out to Australia or anywhere else and want to see whether it's actually generalizable, whether it's applicable in other cultures, in other contexts of operating, in other legal or business regimes, economies that are out there, and whether what you have identified in your own research so far in the UK is actually more widely applicable. And that might require you to pick up collaborations with people who have the right links and the right environment for you to widen the scope of your research. So that gives you a validation in a broader context, perhaps, of your already good findings. Or is it for you just to gain experience? So going out, see how other people approach projects, how they manage research, how they operate, how they go about certain things, and you want to just experience that. So basically, a bit like an apprenticeship or a practice part of your studies, where you go out and just want to learn a bit more how other people are really operating. Or simply put, do you just want to get some publications out of a collaboration, work with other people on an exciting topic, pool together resources, write that great publication for the next journal paper, and see what you can actually pool together of your individual research to perhaps get enough material together for a joint publication as a journal paper. Or, and Shuin gave several examples in here, do you want to attract funding? So are you in need of collaborators either nationally or internationally? Because it can improve your chances of getting that grant, of being able to attract that funding where perhaps you and your organization alone don't quite have the critical mass behind it to convince reviewers that is strong enough as a research background to actually make it. So that is really the question of what is the purpose? Why are you going in there? What is in it for you? Why do you want this collaboration? I think that's a good starting point, because then at least you know why you're setting up and reaching out and trying to find opportunities for collaboration. The second part to ask then is really, what is the purpose behind your organization? So you're working for a university or with a university, more likely. So the question is really, in your own organization, would they support you? Why would they give you the opportunity to engage in an international collaboration, which might incur some extra cost? It's a diverted effort for you, where you're reaching out. Or if it's not your organization that's funding you, so if you're on the ground at the moment, you're a postdoc on the ground, the organization that is currently funding you, have they got an interest in allowing you to collaborate and seeking this collaboration? What is the benefit for them as an organization? Is there strategic alignment with that strategy? Can you benefit recruitment? So if you're at a university, you might want to recruit international students and reach out. So is there an alignment with you going to a particular place, establishing a certain collaboration that can benefit your own organization? Or are you able to take other students with you and get some experience for the students at that point? Or is it simply part of your staff development, where you say, look, I want a sabbatical, I want to go out, and I want to do a certain piece of research. You need to give me time for that. And it's part of your own personal development, of your staff development. How does it fit in with mentorships that you might have? So your mentors, are they able to facilitate perhaps some of these collections then? So this broader envelope of your own personal development and staff development is something to consider, because at some point you have to pitch it to your own organization, and you need their support to be effective and to get the time and the resource to actually make collaboration or initiate collaboration. Moving away from your own perspective, from what is in it for you, what is in it for your organization, the big question then is, if you want to collaborate, why would the other party collaborate with you? So what is really in it for the partners for you? So what is your value proposition? So if you were ringing me up tomorrow and said, look, I want to do some great research on IoT and how we orchestrate different authentication mechanisms inside of IoT environments according to these standards. And you come to me and I'll go like, yeah, okay, so that sounds like a really great topic, but why would I do it? So we don't have IoT to that level. What is in it for me? And if you can articulate that, it's much easier to have that conversation and see, actually, look, it's in your interest, it aligns. You said you had a theme on IoT. I think it will fit in there. so that it's an easy entry point for the other parties to actually decide whether they want to collaborate with you as well. So this value proposition really helps you to set the theme for why the other party would effectively collaborate with you and invest in you in that collaboration as well. So can they really benefit from your expertise? So is there something where you can demonstrate that you have that expertise and contributed into that collaboration? And is it going to be difficult? Because many people are so tied up in terms of what they have to deliver for their own organizations or on projects, that this value proposition is really for them to decide, am I investing in this relationship? Can I maintain that relationship? Do we have a shared objectives in this? Does the timing that you propose work? Because the fact that you might have a sabbatical doesn't mean I'm available or members of my team are available. So are the key people really there? Because it can happen, and I've seen that happening with others before, that you arranged really a great collaboration and done all of this and traveled over to the US for 2 weeks, just to learn basically on the day before that the 2 key people you wanted to really work with are not there and substituted themselves with their PhD students. And you end up there meeting their PhD students and they had to travel somewhere else. So what is the commitment that you got from them for being there, of taking the time then and working with you? And I think that's really then goes back to why would they personally do it, but also why does their organization have an interest in supporting you on that? Now, when you're setting this up, it's really, really important for a collaboration that between all the partners that you're trying to pull together, and that's really a hard thing to do, is how do you develop this shared understanding of what the objective of this collaboration is, so that everyone is quite clear what they can get out of this and why they want to really do it, because that gives you the commitment to make it really happen. And sometimes, particularly, I remember when I was a bit more junior as well, it wasn't that clear. It would benefit me, but I never really thought about what it would do for the others, what would be a great thing. And sometimes you then get the benefit of finding a good mentor overseas that helps you and that wants to support you because of that personal relationship. But that's not always the case, and that's something you need to find out and build. So agree on the outcomes, agree on the responsibilities, what is really coming out of this, and also establish some working agreements of how that is going to work. So I want to meet you every morning for half an hour, and then we can go our separate ways and work out. But it'd be great if we could have lunch or dinner together to see what I have done with your team or how we progress about this. And I think today the question is also whether you can actually meet your collaborators. So can you travel there? Can you meet them face to face? That makes it really personable, very exciting, but we obviously have restrictions today at a very practical level with COVID. 2 more points in here is really, what does success look like? So when you have that collaboration, when do you evaluate whether that is actually working? And what do you need to do to make it work? So how much effort are you willing to put into that? And how do you measure the success of this collaboration? And what kind of agreements do you need? So it might be that you need agreements from your own university to release you. You might need agreements from your host universities where you're going to, or from all the partners as a form of a collaboration agreement. So everyone is quite clear of what the rules of this engagement really are. And that can easily get quite complicated, particularly when you have international visitors, and sometimes underestimated by particularly early career researchers of how much can sit behind that. And while I'm saying it doesn't prevent you from doing collaborations, but sometimes it's good to think these things through beforehand and tick some boxes, even if they're cumbersome and feel a bit like they're administrative and so difficult to do. I just want to meet and talk. It is really being quite clear of what the outcomes are and what then happens with these outcomes. So some things that are in there is when you're on an existing project agreement, let's say you're funded by the NCSC on a project, can you just travel over to Australia and essentially export this intellectual property and share it with partners without the confirmation of your funding body or who's hosting you or your host organization? If you're with Australia, it's usually not a problem. If you go to other countries, that might be more restrictive because you don't necessarily own the intellectual property of your research. It is owned by somebody else. So you have the moral rights to all the work that you do, but not necessarily legal rights on the IP that you're developing. So as you do that, and if you travel to other countries in particular with your research data with other parts, and you want to share the data and work with other people on your projects, does your ethics approval support it? In your ethics approval, you were quite clear with who's the research team, who has access to the data, how do you keep data private, confidential, and secure? Is your collaboration supporting this? Are you sharing data with them? What requirement do you have for them to share data with you to make this effective? Are you subject to any export controls, particularly dual use? And cybersecurity is a rather controversial thing, at least in Australia, and I believe in the UK as well. Are there any foreign influence laws that you can get into when you collaborate and be then at the receiving end of inquiries? So these are all questions. They don't mean it's hard, it's difficult, but they need to be considered, and you need to work them through to make that as seamless as you possibly can. Be clear about IP when you collaborate with industry, as we've seen earlier. Industry is IP hungry. They want to own what you do if they pay you for it. Similar, if you have agreements with other university in the US, it's quite common that if you work on the campus of a US university, everything that you do on there or everything that relates to the purpose of your visit is owned by them by default, unless you find an exception to that agreement. So be a bit careful with how this visiting proposals are being worked through. Don't just turn up and do something. I think that is the big no. Just work it through, and don't be afraid if you get a 30-page legal document back, because that's what they require. And just know what the steps are internally for you to get really that sign off, and just be covered on that front. Agree with them so make sure that you know what agreements need to be in place. So that came from here, from your organization and from all the partners. And ask yourself whether you agreed already about how you manage publications. So if you do joint research, if you do stuff, have you already talked about how you're managing the process of publishing the results afterwards? Is there an intention to publish? With industry, that might not be the case. They might not want to publish it. How you're going about that? What are the rules of how you're engaging? What is the credits? Even sometimes, what is the order of authors, and how is that being determined? And how do you actually get the internal sign-offs for what you need? So for me, the last question really is, are you committed, and are you able to sustain the collaboration? And that's something I've seen happening quite a lot of times, is that you establish all of this, you do it for a singular purpose, and you achieve that outcome. But after that, it's finished. So what is your long-term strategy in this collaboration? What is your long-term objective with establishing these networks, these collaborations? What do you want to do with them? And I think that is something that is important, to be strategic about how you invest your precious time that you have for research into making sure that the collaborations and the outcomes that you're affecting from them are fitting with what you want to personally achieve, how you build your career as a researcher and as an internationally operating researcher, and build your career around that. Because collaborations are hard to do, they're hard to make successful, and they should be really approached with some level of strategic thinking on your own career development part in mind. It's a shame that I don't have the slides, but I can circulate some more information later. I hope my email address can be just shared here with everyone as well. As a cooperative research center for cybersecurity here, we're really set up to build capability and capacity for cybersecurity in the country. And with that, Australia is quite far away from everyone, and we love having visitors over here. I have to say, coming from the UK, the weather is significantly better. So if you're sitting in rainy UK at the moment, I'm sitting here still in 31 degrees at 7 o'clock in the evening. It is quite pleasant summer over here. There are some very nice places to visit. Australia is a beautiful country, and don't be fooled by everyone else telling you that everything here is poisonous and dangerous. Yes, there are poisonous animals, but they're usually much more scared of you than you should be of them. So there is really it's a great country to visit. It's some very good research institutions here that are well worth working with. And it's still part of various agreements. So you have AUKUS, you have Five Eyes, you have NATO. So there's lots of overlaps where Australian cybersecurity researchers are very keen on working with upcoming and new talent in the UK and in countries that are aligned with Australia's values and objectives. So as part of that, we are sponsoring also research visits for early career, mid-career, and also senior researchers on sabbaticals. And for that, we're supporting 6-week exchanges. So 6 weeks over here, where we would cover the travel cost, accommodation, and subsistence to a reasonable amount. And the requirements here from our end are that you work with researchers of at least 2 of our participants' organizations, so the universities I mentioned earlier with, that gets you around Australia quite nicely, and align with 1 or more of our research interests that I talked you through a bit earlier. So anything critical infrastructure, or if it hits automation, privacy, security by design, legal and policy work, that is also of our interest. And some demonstration that you are capable, that you're nationally, internationally leading in your research, or are one of those bright upcoming stars, as it is a competitive process. So that is something that we're launching. If you have an interest in that, please do reach out to me. It's my name, helge.janicke@cybersecuritycsc.org.au. And I look forward to hearing from you. I sent you then some more details of how you can formally apply and what the deadlines are and so on. But it would be great to see some of the UK researchers coming over here and visiting the researchers here in our participant organizations, either in the academic side or also in the government and industry side. If that is of interest to you, I'm happy to facilitate that as well. And I think, Pete, that is all for me at this point. I hope I gave a good overview. I'm sorry I couldn't share the slides, but I hope that was coming across for you still, what at least the key points are for me to consider.
It was brilliant. It was actually quite refreshing to look at someone talking rather than looking at slides. Very, very interesting talk, and I'm definitely very jealous of the current weather conditions. It's not very good here. Brilliant. Thanks, Helge. So again, if you have questions, now is the time to add them into the web portal. They'll come up in front of me, and I will ask them. There is one here already, okay, which is, I suppose this is also a question I wasn't able to ask in the last slot because we ran out of time. But what opportunities you are aware of currently going on that have started since the pandemic? So I suppose it's kind of how have we responded to that in terms of starting new collaborations in the pandemic?
Okay, I think new collaborations in the pandemic are more difficult to do. Yeah, because see, Pete, we know each other from the UK times. The chance of us coming across at a conference, having seen each other's talk, and then actually establishing a meaningful collaboration afterwards is much harder. So this personal relationships is difficult to build if you're not face-to-face, and I think that every country is suffering that to a large extent at the moment. I hope that this is now changing. So Australia is open now for international travel again. That's why we're starting the scheme now. It is really a benefit of going out. You need to be confident that you have something to offer. But that's why I'm saying that to enable that over the long distances, while you haven't got the personal relation, as will be the case with many of you, as they were difficult to build in the last 2 years, is really be confident, think more about it strategically, and really put a clear value proposition forward why you actually would like to do that, so that it's easy for other people to judge and to engage and to perhaps even fund you, as industry, other universities, and us, of course, are doing as well. So many of these opportunities, and there are also opportunities through the European Union, through exchange programs, through others, Australian European associations that are able to do that.
Nice. Yeah, and I guess I had a question myself as well, which was sort of how our industry sort of responded to this in Australia. You know, are they looking at this as an opportunity now to sort of double down on reinvest in cyber innovation, or is it sort of a bit paused due to upsets and other focuses because of obviously COVID disruption to business and things?
Yeah, so it was a disruption. It is a challenge, and the security risks are definitely there. With everyone working from home, people are not set up for it. So you see the increases in ransomware attacks here, as you see it in the UK. It is generally recognized as a big problem. It had the benefit that it focused the minds of boards. So at the board level and executive level, there's a significantly stronger awareness that cybersecurity is an issue they don't quite address and understand yet, and that they are ultimately responsible for. I think that was one of the positive aspects of it. The opportunities that are being taken is, I think, that people realized how good it can be to work from home and that you're being a bit more flexible. And I know that a lot of organizations here in Australia during the lockdowns or in preparation for that now set themselves up and moved agendas forward to be more friendly to working from home. And as a consequence, save on real estate. So real estate is cheap now. Because everyone decided we don't need quite as much as we have, and individual offices are a thing of the past. You have one at home. Let's go for that. And I think that is a natural consequence of people having a bit more freedom from where they work. That obviously businesses then make the savings somewhere else and look for efficiencies in real estate that is otherwise unused.
Excellent. I had another question as well, which is about private investment. Are you seeing much sort of private investment in cyber startups and that sort of thing in Australia at the moment?
Yes, so let's put it that way. Cybersecurity is a sector that is awash with money. Yeah, so everyone knows it's a big problem. There's lots of growth in there, and quite frankly, investors don't quite understand the markets yet very well. So it is reasonably easy to get investment, I think, in cybersecurity compared with some of the other fields. That's a good thing, but you always have the part to it as well as there's lots of money about. The question is, where does the money go and on what basis does it really get invested? And I think you all know when you look at product spaces that there is a bit of snake oil in the sector, of people advertising glorious AI products in anything that they do. And I make this well with that. You clearly have to advise government on that AI part there as well. But sometimes our AI is not yet quite that intelligent. It's very artificial what is in this prospectus sometimes, but not that intelligent. And I think there is a bit of a grain of salt. We all need to look at that and take it with a pinch of salt of what really is advertised, what is really behind it. So having said that, there's a great opportunity for actually research and informing it. And in our relationships, when we done projects on AI and cybersecurity with some of our organizations we are working with, one of the biggest outcomes was knowledge transfer. So they could ask in a procurement process the right questions and suddenly knew a lot more about machine learning and AI algorithms and federated learning than the people that were trying to sell a product to them. And that's a good position for an organization to be in, that you can ask the right questions. And don't underestimate the value of collaborations between industry and academia on that front. That is just purely educational. So industry might not take your research as a product or develop it, but at least through that relationship, that was for them reasonably inexpensive, let's face it. Yeah, they are able to ask the right questions and are not being taken down the road by a perhaps not so savory salesman. Yeah,
absolutely. Brilliant. Just checking the web portal. Last chance for questions. Anyone? I think there's nothing else in there. So thanks very much for your time again and doing it late for us. And I certainly think it's been useful from my perspective. I'd really like to have heard that when I was just starting out as an early career researcher. So thanks a lot for your time.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for inviting me. I hope you have a wonderful time here in the winter school. Australia is doing the Australian summer school in about 3 weeks as well. So we're doing the same, just on the different side of the globe. So there might be some ways of for you guys to just look what is going on here and whether we're mirroring that. I'm happy to send the slides through separately as well. Perhaps Pete, you can circulate them afterwards.